Good morning and welcome to the programme. We are live from our Dungarvan studios. In a minute I'm going to be talking to Patsy McGarry, Irish Times Religious Affairs correspondent, about that programme that was on last night, Redress Breaking the Silence, and on the previous night. We'll also be talking to Maria. I spoke to her this morning and she will be telling us her story of institutional abuse. Some upsetting stories, many upsetting stories told last night. We're also going to be hearing from Brian Fleming, officer in charge of Monmahon Coast Guard, about a new documentary that's on TG Carr tonight. We'll be talking about mesh implants. We'll be talking to a hurler called Gar Campion. We're also going to be talking to Optimists regarding International Women's Day. Firstly, I'm going to see if Patsy McGarry is on the line. Good morning, Patsy.
Morning, Damien.
Thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
I'm very well. And yourself?
Sure, I'm grand, thanks. I'm grand. It's a soft morning down here in the southeast. Tropical weather.
Much the same here.
Yes. Patsy, I'm going to play a tiny little piece here first, if that's okay. It's 1 minute and 50 seconds long. This is from the programme last night, and it was originally broadcast on Questions and Answers. This is Michael O'Brien, who was talking in response to Minister Noel Dempsey at the time. They were talking about the redress scheme, and I suppose you'd agree one of the strongest maybe clips that has ever been broadcast on television, would you think?
Absolutely, very, very powerful, and loses none of its effect, even though it was first broadcast live in 2009, all those 11 years ago almost now. And the sentiments, but really it's the man's passion, and the fact that it wasn't rehearsed, it was so spontaneous, and it's just really, really, I might still feel the same way today, so just I can't really adequately explain its impact then.
No.
But it's as effective now.
Yes, you're right. So, and a health warning comes with this, and about the matters that we are going to discuss in the next 15-20 minutes. So any parents that may have children listening to this, I'd advise you parental warning on this. So this is Michael O'Brien talking at Questions and Answers a number of years ago regarding redress.
I had no idea of what I was going to say until I seen Minister Dempsey.
That isn't an option from a government point of view.
I knew then that now or never. First of all, Mr. Minister, you made a bags of it in the beginning by changing the judges. Because I went to the Lafay Commission and you had 7 barristers there questioning me and telling them I was telling lies when I told them that I got raped of a Saturday, got a merciful beating after it, and then he came along the following morning and put Holy Communion in my mouth. You don't know what happened there. And you're talking to a Fianna Fáil man, a former councillor, a former mayor. You're talking to that what tooth and nail for the party that you're talking about now. You didn't do it right. You got it wrong. Admit it. And apologise for doing that. I attempted to commit suicide. There's the woman who saved me from committing suicide on my way down from Dublin after spending 5 days at the commission. They brought a man over from Rome, 90-odd years of age, to tell me I was telling lies. That I wasn't beaten for an hour, non-stop, by 2 of them. By 2 of them, non-stop, from head to toe without a shred of cloth on my body. That woman will tell you how many times I jump out of the bed at night with the sweat pumping out of me because I see these fellas at the end of the bed with their fingers doing that to me and pulling me into the room to rape me, to bugger me and beat the shite out of me. How can anyone? You're talking about constitution. These people would gladly say yes to a constitution to freeze the funds of the religious order. This state, this country of ours, will say yes to that constitution if you have to change it. Don't say you can't change it. You're the government of this state. You run this state. So for God's sake, stop mealy-mouthing. Because I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it.
Oh, even when you hear it now, Patsy, it sends shivers.
I suppose what gives it such power, Damien, is that is a Fianna Fáil man and a Fianna Fáil activist, a man who had been Mayor of Clonmel, talking to a Fianna Fáil minister. I mean, he was clearly at the end of his tether with frustration dealing with these religious congregations, and indeed just shortly beforehand the Ryan report had come out, which really exposed the systematic abuse of boys in institutions, sexual abuse of boys in institutions, and the system the cruelty of all children in residential institutions run by these 18 religious congregations, including their neglect, the failure to educate them properly. I mean, it is a shocking indictment of the religious and of this Irish society that oversaw that and had ultimate responsibility for it, but turned a blind eye towards it.
It is. The phone line isn't brilliant, Patsy, but we'll continue chatting. Michael O'Brien might well be listening to this because he lives in Tramore, and a lot of shots of him last night down on the prom in Tramore. And we may be getting in touch with Michael later. I'm also going to be talking to Maria, a woman who also lives in Waterford, about her experiences in institutional abuse. A lot of those victims that spoke last night and the previous night, Patsy, they effectively broke an order, a gagging order, preventing them from naming the institutions, naming how much compensation they were awarded. Why do you think they're doing that now? Is it because the redress board is closed down, like the law still stands? Or is it frustration that there's a possibility that these files will be locked away for 75 years, and a lot of these people are getting on in age? They might have felt this is their last chance of being heard.
Well, I think that last point is a very good point, Damien, but there's also another factor. I think I have to take my hat off to RTE for facilitating them in doing so, because these people have been available to media to talk about their stories since the redress board was set up in the early 2000s, and indeed I know it's only been wound up in recent years. But media has been affected most of all by the gagging order. I mean, under the law, you cannot broadcast or print what these people have said or say, or indeed said in that programme last night. I mean, even our own lawyers wouldn't allow us to report in advance, because I'd seen the programme in advance, what was said on the programme last night by those people because of the law. Under the law, you cannot report what people received in awards at the redress board, nor can you report the allegations that they made, what the institution was involved, who the person against whom the allegation was made was, what their name was, etc. I mean, the law is highly, highly circumscribed in this case. The penalties for doing so are very stringent, up to £25,000 in fines and a jail term. So, I mean, that has frightened people off. Most people, indeed, I've noticed last night on the programme that most people didn't disclose what they got. One or two did. Most of them are no longer living in this jurisdiction. But it was courageous of RTE to go ahead with it anyhow.
Can I ask you your general overriding, I suppose, views on the redress board and effectively, Patsy, how the state deals with scandals and abuses that have taken place in the past? I got a general feeling that we'll try and explain it away, and we'll try and give them a few bob, and we'll try and sort of make it look like we're doing something very powerful and very strong, and that the state can cleanse itself. And yet we had so much pain and suffering, and people feeling they got dirty money, gagging money, and they feel that they're just weren't, like, they were told it wasn't going to be an adversarial system when they went in there, and things changed.
Well, Damien, you have to acknowledge, as we all do, that the state is an institution, and the primary purpose of every institution, above all else, is to protect itself. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing well, I don't even think it's debatable. It's not a good thing. But it is what happens. It's what happens where the church was concerned. It's what happens where the state was concerned. There is no doubt about it that in setting up the redress board, the intention on the part of all parties was very good and very positive. People wanted to assist the people who've been in these institutions as far as possible. But then the lawyers got involved, particularly lawyers for the church. And they drove a very hard bargain. It was at their insistence that this clause being inserted into the law, into the act setting up the redress board, that, number one, the institution against whom an allegation was made couldn't be named. The perpetrator of the abuse couldn't be named. The amount of the award given to the person of the institution couldn't be disclosed. And it's just about protecting in this particular context, the religious congregations. And the state had no alternative but to go along with that. And so we have this very mealy-mouthed, where the abuse victims are concerned, finality. In other words, they don't really get satisfaction. There is no justice involved. Nobody has gone to prison or been before a court because of the abuse. They get this money, and it does look like it's a payoff, because you have to sign a clause saying, I won't discuss this, and then disappear. And as happened, it wasn't a very good scheme anyhow, because people got lump sums Some of them weren't able to handle that amount of money. Some of them had addiction issues. The money is gone in a lot of the cases now. Sadly, what they should have done, as was done with the Magdalene women under Mr. Justice John Quirk, is introduce a scheme whereby people who are elderly had an income for the rest of their lives, they had health care for the rest of their lives, they have housing for the rest of their lives, and they have access to education, free education for the rest of their lives for those who wish to avail of it. That is a lesson that has been learned, if you like, from the redress board scheme. It did not work out in practice, though the intention initially, anyhow, was very, very positive and very benign where the abuse survivors were concerned.
And it's cost €1.5 billion, and the religious orders have paid initially around 200 million, and 250 million I think they're due to pay in total. And Micheál Martin said it was a mistake, the decision regarding the cap from the religious orders. Isn't that right?
Well, I mean, I have to say this. Micheál Martin was the Minister for Health and Children in that government. He didn't challenge the deal. It was the last thing agreed to by that government in 2002. It was brought before the government by the then Minister for Education, Michael Woods, and he had concluded the deal on his own with the religious congregations, with the Secretary of the Department of Education at the time, John Dennehy, the two of them on their own without officials, because that's the way the religious wanted it. They didn't want the Attorney General's office involved, they didn't want the Department of Finance involved, and so the Attorney General's office was left out of it, and the Department of Finance were left out of it because they had been fighting a very hard bargain, and then Michael Woods and John Dennehy agreed the deal, presented to the final cabinet meeting of that government of 2002, in June 2002, and the government signed off on it. It was a shocking mistake, a huge and costly mistake where the state is concerned, and it brought no satisfaction to the main people involved in this whole thing, the abuse survivors.
Patsy McGarry, it's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jamie.
Patsy McGarry there, religious affairs correspondent with the Irish Times. I am going to be talking, you're going to hear an interview with Maria, who lives in Waterford. She's been living in West Waterford for a while and also in the city for a number of years. She's originally from Dublin. She was talking to me this morning about, I spoke to her, I did an interview with her before in a coffee shop before I came to Dungarvan about her abuse. You're going to hear that in a minute. 083 3333 975 083 3333 975. Anybody who saw the programme last night, a lot of reaction on Facebook and on Twitter, please text in, or you can call 051 846 123. Stay with us. We are in our Dungarvan studios. Just before I came to Dungarvan, I spoke with Maria, who has and was in an institution from the age of 2. This is in relation to Redress Breaking the Silence programme that was on RTE last night. Well done to RTE for the marvellous production, and to Mick Pilo, the reporter and the producers of the show. Sonia has been in touch. It was shocking to watch, Damien. Heartbreaking. Avril said it was very sad. Eleanor, I'm ashamed of my country. They let monsters rule it for too long. Catherine Power, the fact that an elderly man had to go on hunger strike to get a hearing is disgusting, and then throwing them pathetic money. Not that money could erase the horrific monstrous events. Bernadette Phillips saying appalling and heartbreaking. The state knows how to contain a scandal. Pauline Roach saying it was just awful, and dozens upon dozens of texts regarding that. Here is the interview with Maria. Maria, good morning.
Good morning to you, Damien.
You were watching the programme last night and the previous night.
I was watching the 2-part documentary on Monday and Tuesday.
What did you think?
It was very accurate. Also to remind the population today, the general population today, that these atrocities didn't just happen in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. These incidents were happening in the 80s and the 90s. And some people who left the system as early as like 1991, 1992. These incidents were happening right up until then. It wasn't the black and white photographs and the scruffy-kneed children and, that...
How do you know they were still happening?
Because I was one of them, and I came out of the system in 1991.
Where were you?
I was totally breaking the law here now, Damien. I don't care in relation to the Residential Intrusion Redress Act. I was in St Mary's Industrial School in Sandymount in Dublin. I was made a ward of the state from age 2 until I was 18 years of age, from 1975 to 1991.
Why are you breaking the law by saying that?
There is a section in the Residential Intrusion Redress Act which... Number one, I'm not supposed to disclose the industrial school in which I was a resident of. Obviously, you're not to speak about the perpetrators who who inflicted abuse upon children, because it would identify them. If I were to, I could be fined up to €25,000 and or imprisoned. Also, after watching that programme 2 nights in a row, it very clearly again re-victimises the 16,000 people who were brave enough to give submissions and evidence to the Lafoy Commission, and also the findings on the Ryan report,
Why are you willing to break the law now?
I would have had personal dealings with the redress board. There's criminality within the body of those redress board statements. I've spoken to many people. I've seen statements belong to these people. The Residential Intrusion Redress Act basically is asking the person to state incidents of abuse within the industrial school setting. But there were plenty of people who were abused outside of that setting by individuals while they were living in residential children's homes. They wrote down the abuse that happened to them. I'll give you an example. There was a male. There was a man who was living in an industrial school. This was in the 60s, early 70s, who obviously absconded from the children's home, was picked up by a member of An Garda Síochána, was brought to a location and raped by a member of An Garda Síochána, and because he didn't have a direct link and was not a member of staff of the industrial school, that was outside of the remit of the Redress Act.
What county did this take place in?
This took place in Waterford.
How do you know this?
Because I spoke to the victim himself.
And he's still alive?
He is still alive.
Living in Waterford?
Yes. Yes, he is.
And just explain to an ordinary person why something like this hasn't gone before the courts. For example, a rape is a rape.
As we know, Damien, under the law, sexual acts, there is no statute of limitations in relation to that. There were plenty of people who disclosed incidents within the body of those redress board statements, which, as I said, were outside the remit of the Redress Act itself. They were only concentrating on abuse that happened within the industrial school setting. So any abuse that has happened to individuals by perpetrators who were not directly linked to the industrial schools, nothing happened to them. Nothing has happened to these individuals. For example, there is an incident where there was children who went on to foster care, who went on to be systemically abused, physically, not sexually, systemically abused for a number of years by qualified social care workers who once would have had previous experiences in the residential care home setting. This was disclosed within the body of redress board statements. It was ignored by the redress board. Also, while they were reading those statements and awarding the individual their compensation for the atrocities that happened to them in the industrial school setting, those people on the board totally ignored the foster care abuse, naturally, because it didn't come under the remit of the Redress Act.
What is the situation, before I talk about yourself, is this former guard, is he still alive?
I'm not privy to that information. I was just privy to the information to what the individual was telling me in relation to the experiences that they had.
And how is that man now?
That man is married with grown-up children. I suppose an awful lot of individuals who came out of the industrial school setting, residential care home setting, are doing the best they can.
Maria, tell me a little bit about your own situation. You went into a home when you were only 2?
I went into... I was made a ward of the state from age 2 to 18.
Why?
The family setting had broken down. My father, after having many children, was diagnosed with mental health issues when he was in his late 20s, early 30s, after popping out 8 children. Obviously, my mother was not supportive, and I think it was 6 or 8 weeks later she walked out and never came back. Never came back.
And was Dublin home for you?
Dublin was home for me, yes. I grew up in St Mary's Industrial School in Sandymount in Dublin.
So it was the only childhood that you knew?
There was no other benchmark to go by, Damien.
And what, you mentioned earlier the word atrocities. What abuse happened to you?
Well, if people have looked over the last 22 years in relation to the breaking of the silence of the systemic abuse that occurred in industrial schools, they would see very clearly those programmes that you saw. Christine Buckley, there was States of Fear. Then there was Christine Buckley, who had aired one on another radio or another television station. It really opened people's eyes to the extent of what was happening behind closed doors. So the abuse that would have been perpetrated towards me would have been exceptionally similar to the documentaries that people would have seen on television programmes over the last 22 years.
Physical, sexual, emotional?
Thankfully, I was never sexually abused. However, I do know other residents who were in the same children's home as me, where they were being sexually abused. Again, some people were being sexually abused by people who were not staff within the residential care home setting. However, I'll give an example. Obviously, I won't mention names. Children naturally not want to join activities, after school activities. There was a Boy Scout leader. Who was sexually abusing boys who were going down to Scouts on a weekly basis.
This was up in Dublin?
This was up in Dublin. Then,
how many people, excuse me, how many people do you think across the country, you mentioned a figure earlier of 16,000?
16,000, well, 15,700 and so many individuals made claims to the redress board when it was established. So that figure, is it a real and true figure? No, because there are also thousands upon thousands of people who never had and who never came to the redress board to give evidence, written evidence.
Why didn't they?
They found it too traumatising. Also, as well, it would have blown their cover, so to speak, because people have left those institutions and have never told people that they have befriended throughout their life. I mean, I know one individual who I grew up with who has never spoken to her best friends, to people that she has formed long-term standing friendships with. They don't know an iota of where she was raised. And it's hilarious, actually. I mean, in the everyday setting, I mean, even going on a date, people, what's the natural process of going on a date? Who are you? Where are you from? What do your parents work at? Oh, where did you grow up? You know? It's just the natural course of things, or job interviews, or, you know, or it's just...
Why is that? Is it a perceived sense of shame?
Well, I suppose it depends.
Because they spoke about it in the programme, this idea of shame.
There is a stigma attached to it. I don't think the stigma exists so much today as it would even 20-something years ago. I suppose the perception was people who would have come out of that setting, well, look, it has been well established and known that people who were, suppose I hate the word, institutionalised, and that's what they were. Institutionalised, where they would come out of the industrial school residential care home setting with not social norms. There was no social interaction. You know, everything that we would take for granted growing up in relation to interaction between other people, like parents, siblings, children, school, after school activities, things like that help to shape and nurture a child, were non-existent in these residential care home settings.
How has it affected you?
I thought for many years I came away unscathed from the experiences that I had. But looking back now through the eyes of an adult, many years later, that was far from the truth. Far from the truth. Yeah, I didn't. I would have behaved in certain ways, as they're called triggers, you know. certain senses. One thing that it has done for the 18 years of my life was, you read about behavioural psychology. I lived it. I mean, when you're going around for the bones of that length of time where all of your senses are heightened all of the time, 24/7, you learn very quickly to read people, Communication, verbal, non-verbal communication, changes in tone, changes in body language, changes in how a person might look at you. That all are massive indicators as to how a person is going to be towards you. Are they going to be reactive? Are they not going to be reactive? Changes in tone of voice, if somebody's lying to you, if somebody's not lying to you. I mean, you can have it to your advantage, of course, but...
They spoke last night of the money situation, the payouts.
Oh, yeah, the residence, the redress board process itself. Basically, obviously, the commercials and the ads were on the radio. They were in print, both in Ireland and England and other places where perhaps people had settled. The majority of people that came from the industrial school setting, especially the older generation, they were left illiterate. They can't read or write. They cannot put into words, they cannot articulate on paper the experiences they had. Also, as well, the government, they didn't have forward planning or thinking in relation to this. You're dealing with a huge vulnerable members of society where they're expected to suddenly sit down and write these atrocities or to relay them to a solicitor or a barrister without any counselling beforehand. A lot of these individuals would have had to have seen a psychologist to prepare them for that.
Did you get any money yourself?
I did.
Are you going to break the law now and tell me how much?
I broke the law before. I don't give a monkey's.
How much you get?
Well, I went down to Cork. I stayed in a hotel the night before, and then on the morning of the hearing, I was placed in a hotel room on my own, and there was my solicitor and barrister down in Cork were representing me. I did not physically see the board themselves. The atrocities that were perpetrated towards me would be what you would read and watch on television. There was the beatings, there was the force feeding, there was the ridiculing, there was the wrought iron cold baths dumped into it from age 2 to many years for bedwetting. There was the ridiculing, there was the wrapping your smelly sheets around you you had to pass through a kitchen with other children in order to bring that to the laundry. You were demeaned. I mean, if you ever had confidence issues, the list goes on and on. I mean, everything that you read about the force feeding, the domineering side of individuals, and house devils, street angels.
Would you see it as dirty money, as some people said in the programme last night?
I have heard individuals who came out of the system where they see it's like hush money or it's like dirty money.
How much was it for yourself?
Oh, right. I'm down in Cork. Solicitors, they come in first and they tell me, listen, they're only offering you €25,000. And I started laughing. And it's actually a bit surreal because they're basing the horrific experiences that you had all in a point system. It's all done in a point system and on a grade system. Like, if you've only got a bit of a slap to, I mean, we'll give you $2,000 for that, So
how much was it in the end?
They came. I laughed, 25,000. They went back out, came back in, and I paid. Obviously, was going to be paying for myself overnight in the hotel. And then when they came back with the measly amount of 25,000, I started laughing. They came back then, and my final settlement was 40,000. And I included the 200 for my hotel stay. Yes.
And can money compensate for what has happened to you?
Money can never compensate for the experience of anybody who lived in those children's homes. Nothing can ever compensate because you only have one childhood. It was taken from you. It can never be reclaimed. Now, I'm sure was the money useful to other individuals? That's a double-edged sword for them, really. There were people who would have had pre-existing addiction issues, homelessness, mental health issues, where the support wasn't there.
Maria, we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah.
You only have one childhood and money can never compensate sometimes what has happened to you. Let us know what you think. 083 33 975. Michael O'Brien is a hero in my eyes, say Anne Troy. Other people saying, oh my God, that is so sad what Maria has been saying. And Stephanie Hickey has texted as well on the Facebook post last night. Keep your texts and comments coming in. Next we are going to talk about a really exciting development, potentially regarding the Vikings. Now, a lot of people texting in, oh my God, Damien, what those poor souls went through. I was in a school where a teacher publicly and physically abused us. Also, bet with a stick in a public school. These things should be investigated as well. Damien, the abuse over the years is incomprehensible. When will it end? Damien, what's the name of Stephanie Hickey's book? Running from the Shadows is what's it called. Also, we want you to text in, please. Give me a break. GIMME. Give me a break to 083 33 975 if you want to enter our competition for our holiday well, courtesy of Select Hotels of Ireland. In a few minutes, I'm going to be talking to a hurler who has admitted taking drugs. Firstly, I'm going to talk to Neil Jackman. Good morning, Neil.
Good morning, Damien. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks very much for coming into us. You're with a company called Abarta. Tell us who is Abarta.
Well, Abarta Heritage, we're based in Clonmel, so just up the shore, and we're archaeologists originally. We started around 2012, and the main thing we try to do is to connect people to the history and to make archaeology accessible in a way. So you might have met Christina from the great community group that are doing fantastic things at Gallows Hill here in Dungarvan. One of the projects that we manage is the Adopt a Monument scheme on behalf of the Heritage Council, and they're, of course, one of the groups working with us on that. So we do a lot of kind of trying to connect people to the past, and we do audiobooks and things like that. Yeah.
Now, in the News and Star, there's a big article about one-of-a-kind attraction earmarked for the Viking site at Woodstown in Waterford, down beside the shore. Not Woodstown, down past in Galtier. We're talking yes. Woodstown where the bypass is.
Exactly, yeah. Close enough to Waterford IT. Actually, it's just down from there.
What sort of a site are we talking about? How much of an area?
It's quite a big stretch, actually. The acreage has just gone out of my mind now. But it runs for a good long length alongside the Waterford Greenway now, and alongside the banks of the shore there as well.
People might remember the Woodstown site was discovered back in 2003, and during advanced negotiations, investigations on the N25 Waterford City bypass. So what you're proposing is a visitor attraction or a historical attraction or some way of developing the site. What are you looking to do?
Well, it's an incredibly important archaeological site, first and foremost, and that kind of has to rank higher than almost anything else. It's a really vulnerable site in lots of ways as well. So, but it's a site that has tremendous potential, I think, given now that it's sited right alongside the Greenway. The thing is, for such an important site, this is a large 9th century Viking longfort, Viking settlement. It's an incredibly important site, one of the most important that was ever discovered during the boom times, but it's completely intangible. You wouldn't know it's there. You wouldn't know it's there. It's not like looking at the Rock of Cashel, or it's not even like when you go to the Hill of Tara and it's just earthworks. There's literally nothing to see above the ground.
And the reason for that is topography, it's geography, it's the fact that the Vikings at that stage didn't build big castles, as we know,
yes.
And a lot of their groundworks were covered by flooding alluvial settlements, and they were underground. So in terms of developing the bypass, there were some archaeological digs, and they did find quite significant material.
Huge, yes. So they excavated around about 5% of the site.
That 5% only?
5% only. In that 5%, they identified that it was a very large, almost unique Viking settlement that was of tremendous importance. It seemed to be not just a fort for raiding, it was a place for trading and for industry and craft and things like that. Some of the artefacts are actually on display in Reginald's Tower. They include, they found the burial of a Viking warrior as well, with a sword, shield, spear, axe. This is a person of extreme high status in society. So the site itself appears to be one that is very significant for archaeology, because we know from a lot of historical accounts about the first phase of Viking activity in Ireland and Britain in the West. And that's when they're basically hitting and running and, raiding monasteries and all of this kind of thing. We know what happens next when the settlements turn into some of our first cities, like Waterford itself, of course, and Cork and Dublin and Limerick. But what we were always missing was that in-between stage. These overwinter camps, what we know as long forts, and this appears to be one.
And this would be from around 1850 to 1950 AD. So the settlement was declared a national monument in 2005. Yes. Who owns the settlement?
So largely, the vast majority of it fall within Waterford City and County Council lands. It was CPO'd as part of the road development.
And you gave a talk to the City Council recently about this.
That's right, exactly. Parts of the site also fall just outside of it as well, within private landowners' thing. But the vast majority is within council land, so they have a duty of care to it. I was actually thinking that at the time I was looking back at some of the original press around Woodstown. It's almost slightly negative that it's holding back progress. It's holding back the development of the road. But if you think about it, if that decision hadn't have been made to move the site at that time, the Waterford Greenway would be a completely different proposition. It would be running alongside a motorway for most of its length. So the Vikings did us a big favour in a lot of ways, I think.
What do you want to do? Like, you're a private company?
Yes.
So you want to work with the council and develop this? Is that what are you looking at doing?
Well, I was.
You're not looking at a theme park, are you?
No, God, no. And that would be the very worst thing, some kind of Viking Disneyland. No, we were appointed by the council on behalf of the Waterford, the Woodstown Viking Site Steering Committee, and that's made up of the County Council, National Museum of Ireland, National Monuments Service, the Norwegian Embassy are involved, National Biodiversity Data Centre, UCC, Department of Archaeology. So there's a lot of different stakeholders. We were appointed, and they've done a lot of work over the years since the site was first discovered to look at what the potential future could be. It was our task to amalgamate all of that information, to go to public consultation, which we did at the Heritage Week event there that DEISE Medieval do every year, and to put forward a strategy for how best to understand the site, how best to conserve it and maintain it for the future, and how best to interpret it to tell its story. So that's what our task was. It's called a Conservation Management Plan, and that will be issued in the pretty near future, certainly before the summer.
And if somebody wants to get in touch with you, if somebody wants to talk about this, to propose ideas, to hear from what you're saying, how do they get in touch with you?
So when the plan goes out there, there will be a period of public consultation after that then with the council, and people are welcome to come along to that. So the general idea, the vision that we've put forward for it is that it's kept as a place for research, for archaeology. So it's such a big stretch of land that what I would love to see is that there's ongoing archaeological field schools doing very small targeted amounts of excavation, because at the end of the day archaeology is destructive. Once you dig something, you've destroyed it to understand it, how old it was, how it was built and so on. So very targeted excavations involving Irish students, involving Norwegian students and Scandinavians involved as well, to the very highest research standards. And then in the adjacent field to use experimental archaeology to reconstruct all the buildings that were discovered during the surveys and excavations. So essentially, the site re-emerges along the banks of the shore, just in the adjacent field. So it becomes tangible again. And then I think we're really blessed here in Waterford to have a group like DEISE Medieval who do terrific events. They take it very seriously. They're very well researched and so on. So there's the opportunity there to have living history, that people can come along, see what Viking food was like and experience it for themselves.
It sounds brilliant. I know people can contact you through the council. They can also get you ABARTA, Abarta, and also DEISE Medieval on Facebook. Good luck with it, and maybe we'll talk again over the summer.
Thanks very much, Damien. I'd just like to say as well, the plan will be coming out soon, and if anyone's interested in the story of Woodstown, there's a publication out there called Woodstown, a Viking Age Settlement, and there's also a free audio book. If you go onto iTunes or whatever podcast you use, just search Woodstown Viking, and you should find it from there. Okay, thank you.
Neil Jackman, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you, Dave.
Next, we're going to be talking about hurling and drugs. Now, our text and WhatsApp number 083 333 975. You might want to text as well about this next person that's on. Gar Campion, can you hear me?
Yeah, Damien, can you hear me?
I can hear you there, Gar. Listen, I'm going to talk about your drugs issue and how drugs enhances your hurling. So just please pause for a second, because we have to put a health warning on this, because this is very, very important. Anybody involved in sport, I know you're going to deny it, but I am accusing you of...
Hang on a second now, Desi, right? You asked me to come on your show, right?
Sorry, it's Damien.
Sorry?
Damien Tiernan. Damien Tiernan's my name.
Damien,
your name's Gar Campion, is it?
Well, my name's obviously Gar Campion, you know that, like. But I mean, you have a show called Desi today, and you're coming on, you're saying your name's Damien. Who are you filling in for, like? Where's the real fella?
I really, really don't like you, and I don't normally come out on air and say this about guests, but I have to put it to you. Why did you take drugs to put that ball over the bar from 75 yards?
Listen, Desi, right, here's the thing, right? I was found guilty of that little offence, right? But
it wasn't a little offence. Tell our listeners, what did you take? Where did you smoke it?
I wasn't smoking at all now, Desi, do you know what I mean? Like, my lungs are me lungs are me vessel. Sorry?
Damien.
All right, yeah. Listen, but anyway, here's the thing. Like, look, I'm going around doing this show, telling me story, spoken word. Like, I'm like Robert Frost, except not boring. Do you know what I mean? I'm going around giving great information, laughs, songs, poses, loads of deadly stuff, fashion advice. And here's these.
Great at avoiding questions. You're like a politician. You are so good at avoiding questions. Like, do you not think that you should have been banned for life from hurling because of what you did, and also purely because of your arrogance? You are one arrogant man.
Well, listen, Desi, like, you can't be banned for being arrogant, all right? No one can ban you for... Yeah, sorry, look, but no one can ban you for being deadly, okay? Now, you make up your mind which question you'd like me to answer, and then I'll answer it.
Okay, I'd like to ask you... a lot of hurlers talk about how they can put the ball over the bar, over their shoulders from around 60, 70 yards out. Mm-hmm. You're a man that likes exaggerating a lot. I believe you exaggerate a lot about your physical prowess as well.
Absolutely not. I mean, everyone knows that Gar Campion is the undisputed greatest hurler of all time. I mean, with 10 All-Stars, 3 Hurler of the Year awards and countless team honours, Gar Campion is so good at what he does, he'd make the second coming of Christ make it look like he never came at all. Now, those aren't my words, Damien, sorry. But they are the words of a guy called @DeadlyLegend420 on Twitter. And I mean, he has over 200 followers. So that's fairly undeniable. Like,
Why do you talk about yourself in the third person?
Just because that's my name. Like, I don't know who's 3 people. Like, there's only one Gar Campion. Everyone knows that.
Yeah, but like it's a sign of arrogance again, and of a big-headedness that somebody talks about themselves in the third person. Like, what do you actually do in life? Like, apart from, you can't make money out of hurling. Like,
sorry, I'm just coughing there now. It's not that coronavirus, by the way. And I wish everyone had calmed down about this. I mean, all it's doing is filling Donald Trump's mouth with more anti-Mexican stuff. Just because corona is causing a virus doesn't mean people should be, voting Republicans or anything like that. Like.
Well, I understood that you wore gloves when you were hurling a lot because you were basically a wuss, and you didn't catch anything with those gloves. So maybe you should put the gloves on now instead of actually trying to do a bit of hurling.
Well, I mean, it shows you what you know about hurling. I mean, I'm one of the greatest hurlers that's ever, like, laced up a pair of boots or held a stick in my hand, like, do you know what I mean? And here's the thing, like, absolutely not. And I mean, look, at least you're asking different questions. I'm sick of going on shows and people asking me stupid questions, like, am I as volatile a player as they say I am? Sure, of course I am. Like, I can play anywhere. You know, midfield, attack, defence. I even played on goal once for the school, and it doesn't get much more volatile than that, Desi, does it?
Now I know, Damien. Now I know your coach Jim Nolan also claims to be a great hurler. You're actually revealing your inner secrets at the Theatre Royal, isn't it?
It's Garter Lane, so I mean, like, at least do your research before I come on your show.
Well, let's try and have everybody going to Garter Lane. Going to the Theatre Royal.
No, Garter Lane. You're right there, Garter Lane.
No, maybe they should go to Theatre Royal instead, because, like, I wouldn't want to listen to you, you know?
Well, I tell you one thing, like, I was going to say something there, I won't even say it. Garter Lane is the thing, and I'm saying, look, it's Garter Lane.
Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll go to Garter Lane tomorrow night, Thursday night.
Oh, I'd like to see you down there.
I'll go there, and you are going to be giving away a pair of tickets for this event. What night are you giving away a pair of tickets for?
Thursday night. Oh, opening night. An audience with Gar Campion.
An audience with Gar Campion, and it's on Thursday, Friday, Saturday?
Thursday, Friday and Saturday, that's right.
Okay, very good. You're excellent. Tony Kelly, how are the sales going?
Yeah, it's going good, Damien. All is good, to be honest with you. Saturday night sold out, Friday night almost there, and then tomorrow night's opening night is selling well, but opening night obviously usually a little bit slower because people are not quite sure what to expect, especially with this, because it was a web series first. It was a screen thing first, you know what I mean? It wasn't a stage thing, so it's the first time we've ever done Gar live in this setting, but I think it's something that I think people will never have seen anything quite like it before, to be honest.
And people are saying, Damien, you're not very funny, you're not a comedian. Gar is the only comedian in all this. That must be your friend that sent that in, I think.
It's not a friend of Gar's, I wouldn't say anyway.
Text it yourself, I'd say. That's what it is.
Probably, yeah.
Tony Kelly, anybody wants to win the prize tickets for tomorrow night for Garter Lane. Just text in GAR, G-A-R, into 083 333 975. I believe it's an excellent show. Jim Nolan says it's a great production. And listen, the very best of luck with it.
Thanks, Damien. Yeah, and look, there is tickets still available for tomorrow night and a few for Friday as well from garterlane.ie or ring Garter Lane. It runs Thursday to Friday. It's probably going to be the only 3 nights we do in Waterford before we hopefully take it off elsewhere, which is the plan. And look, Jim Nolan directing it. It doesn't get any more kind of a stamp of approval from theatre than that, I don't think. But garterlane.ie or call Garter Lane to get tickets for tomorrow or Friday.
On the ball.
Thanks very much, Damien.